All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share some slides to get us started. It's a little bit different with webinar. I don't get feedback. So if my audio or visual cuts out at any point, please let me know. I'm Dr. Jessica Schwartzman. I am a member of the ABCT Autism Spectrum and Developmental Disabilities SIG as part of the membership committee, along with my partner, Dr. Allison Ratto. We're really excited to invite everybody to this event. This will be part of our virtual seminar series, specifically focused on internship and postdoctoral experiences, which is a very exciting topic. I'll go over kind of a brief schedule today, as well as some housekeeping tips that will hopefully kind of get us started. Let me advance my slides. So in terms of today's event, we've got a jam-packed hour. I'll give a brief overview. I'm going to take a few minutes to introduce each of our talented panelists who have donated generously their time and expertise to be with us today. I'll also briefly talk about the two breakout rooms, I should say, that we'll have. Again, one will be focused more on the internship experiences. So there will be panelists who are both faculty and trainees heavily involved in the internship process. The second breakout room will be focused more on postdoctoral experiences, hearing from a variety of faculty in different areas, from research, clinical areas to industry, as well as some trainees that are currently on postdoc or wrapping up shortly. And then we'll go ahead and conclude with a few housekeeping tips and general remarks for the groups. As a first housekeeping tip, today's event will be recorded. And so once we conclude today's event, all of the recordings will be sent to the attendees of this event. So we will not be posting it publicly, but if you attended, you will have access to the recording. A nice feature about Zoom is that we have a few capabilities to interact. So throughout today, if you have a question or a comment, we highly encourage folks to use the chat feature as well as the Q&A. Both breakout rooms have a moderator who will keep an eye on the chat and the Q&A to make sure that we try to address those. We also have some questions prepared that we think will be helpful in getting us started. In the event that we cannot cover all of the chat and the Q&A questions, at the end, we do have a slide that will be sharing all of the contact information with our panelists who have graciously agreed to be contacted if you have specific questions or anything that you want to follow up with those panelists about. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing in order to read all of the great introductions that I have. Let's see. Here we go. All right, so to get us started, I'm going to do some introductions of the various folks that will be in the different rooms. So first, I'll start with the internship breakout room, and that'll be moderated by myself. The faculty will be Dr. Hillary Goldstein and Dr. Caitlin Ehlers. And our trainees will be Morgan McNair and Lachey Williams. So to give you a little background on each of those panelists, Dr. Goldstein is a former intern and current training director of the AHRC Psychology Internship. She directs and participates in the Clinical Center for Disabilities, which the internship runs, and it's one of the largest outpatient clinics in New York City that's focused on providing services to people with developmental disabilities throughout the lifespan. And Dr. Ehlers, so Caitlin Ehlers is a child clinical psychologist and assistant professor of psychiatry at Dartmouth Health and the Geisel School of Medicine at Dartmouth in New Hampshire. She's a faculty member and one of the supervisors on the child psychology internship track as part of the Dartmouth Psychology Internship Program. She herself completed her doctoral training at the University of Montana, followed by a generalist child internship at the University of Arizona and a 2-year developmental disabilities focused clinical and research postdoc fellowship at the University of Washington in Seattle Children's Autism Center. And then for Morgan, Morgan is a doctoral psychology intern at the Children's Hospital of Atlanta as part of Emory University. Her internship is focused on assessment and early intervention in autism. As a clinical psychology graduate student at Stony Brook University, she worked under the mentorship of Dr. Matthew Lerner, and her research interests center on social interaction behaviors and social problem solving in autistic and non-autistic children. Lachey Williams. Dr. Williams is a postdoctoral fellow in pediatric neuropsychology at the UCLA Semel Institute for Neuroscience and Human Behavior. She completed her PhD in clinical psychology at Drexel Autism Institute as part of Drexel University, and she completed her clinical internship in pediatric neuropsychology at UCLA. All right. And then I guess to introduce myself, since I will be there, and Dr. Jessica Schwartzman, I completed my internship and postdoc at Vanderbilt University. I had a lab there for several years and recently moved my lab to USC, and we're housed at Children's Hospital LA. I actively participate in both the internship and postdoc processes here as faculty. All right, so to introduce you briefly to the postdoc panelists, the clinical faculty include Dr. Marissa Miller and Dr. Rod Salgado. Both are at Children's National. We also have Dr. Rafe Bernier from Apple, who will be providing an industry faculty perspective for those that are on the postdoc panel. In terms of research faculty, we have Drs. Erin Kang and Jesse Greenlee, who I'll introduce as well in a moment. And in terms of our postdoc trainees, we have Alan Gerber and Dr. Yvette Bean. So I'll go ahead and take a moment to introduce each of those faculty really quickly. Okay. So Dr. Marissa Miller is a clinical psychologist who focuses on comprehensive evaluation for youth who may have neurodevelopmental diagnoses like autism and ADHD. She has worked in outpatient hospital, private practice, and school settings and generated online content for parents and teachers. She's passionate about neurodiversity and the whole of the community and supportive of the many different pathways that people bring to meaningful careers in psychology. Dr. Rod Salgado earned his PhD in educational psychology from the University of Oregon. He participated in an internship through the Hawaii Department of Health and completed a 2-year postdoc in child clinical psychology at Kennedy Krieger Institute. Currently, Dr. Salgado is a neurodevelopmental psychologist at the Center for Autism at Children's National Medical Center and is a faculty at George Washington University School of Medicine. And I'm just going to check the chat to make sure everybody can hear us. Okay. All right. And then moving on again to continue to introduce our postdoc panelists. Dr. Bernier is currently a scientist at Apple Incorporated. He was formerly the William J. and Lydia N. Gumerman Endowed Professor of Child Psychiatry at the University of Washington, the Executive Director of the Seattle Children's Autism Center, and the Associate Director of the Center on Human Development and Disability. He's the author of over 250 scientific articles and 2 books, was the PI or co-I on over 40 NIH and privately funded studies that looked at neuroscience and the etiology of neurodevelopmental disorders, and is an active clinician. All right, so continuing on for our panelists. I just want to make sure that I've gotten everybody so far. Okay, to introduce our more research-focused faculties, first we have Dr. Erin Kang, who is currently an assistant professor in the psychology department at Montclair State University, where she directs the Autism and Neurodevelopmental Lab. She mentors 35 undergraduate, master's, and doctoral students on her research team. She received her PhD from Stony Brook University, and her research focuses on integrating science and practice by understanding factors that shape clinical presentations in autistic youth, among other areas, like applying insights to refine and innovate evidence-based interventions. Next, Dr. Jesse Greenlee is an assistant professor of psychology at Lafayette College. She earned her PhD in developmental psychology from Virginia Commonwealth University and completed a T32 postdoc at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. As an autistic scientist, Dr. Greenlee's research focuses on alleviating mental health disparities in autistic populations with an emphasis on middle childhood through emerging adulthood. And then to briefly introduce the trainees that will be serving on the postdoc panel, we have Dr. Yvette Bean, who received a Doctor of Philosophy and Educational School Psychology from the University of Georgia. She completed an internship at the Kennedy Krieger Institute, and she is now completing a second-year postdoc fellowship at Kennedy Krieger Center for Autism Services, Science and Innovation, where she provides autism assessments and treatments. And Dr. Alan Gerber earned his PhD in clinical psychology from the Stony Brook University under the mentorship of Dr. Matthew Lerner. Recently, he completed a T32 postdoc at the Yale Child Study Center, working with Dr. James McPartland. In the fall, Dr. Gerber will be joining the faculty at Children's National Hospital as an assistant professor in the Division of Pediatric Neuropsychology and the Center for Neuroscience Research. So thank you again to all of our panelists for participating in today's event. We greatly appreciate it. What we'll go ahead and do now is we're going to break out into the two rooms. What we'll do is you'll have an option. I think you'll be placed in your rooms. Again, the recordings of both rooms will be available. So if you feel as though you missed something, you will have access to that. We encourage you to use the chat and Q&A features, and we'll go ahead and get the Q&A section started. Thank you all for being here.
And I'm just hearing from our technology support that there's just been a little bit of a hiccup in trying to set up the breakout rooms. So it's actively being worked on, but it may just take an extra moment to get that done. So I wonder if one of our, I'm just going to check in and see how much timing we might need for that. And then
Sure.
we
I
can
go
maybe
over a
get
few
started. Yeah.
housekeeping things while you do that. So one of the things that we have found and learned from other trainees in the past is it can also be nice to connect with each other as you're going through these shared experiences of internship applications and finding postdocs. So if you feel comfortable sharing your name and your contact information in the chat, I think that can be a nice feature to connect with folks that are attending amongst each other and learning from these various processes. Can we highlight the panelists as well? We can't see anyone except for the person speaking. Thank you for that feedback. I will see how I do that. You would think after many a year in remote learning with the pandemic, I would have known how to do these things, but I do not. Allison, I don't know if you know how to do that or anybody.
I think that might be a technical thing that we need to get our support team to get started before, because the panelists are all able to see each other is the fun background for those of you who are attendees right now, as we're all looking at each other and looking very, very lovely and professional. But I think that might just be a feature that's having a little trouble setting up right now.
I think what we can do, again, I will show this slide again, but while we're kind of waiting for the tech to get loaded, I'll go ahead and share the slide that has all of our panelists' contact information. You'll get a chance to see this again, but I wanted to go ahead and post it here. Again, I've divided it up based on the area of interest or focus for each of the panelists. And again, feel free contact them. They've been very gracious in being willing to answer any questions related to internship, postdoc, or professional development more broadly.
Okay, thank you all for your patience. So I just got an update that it is possible that this may need to shut down and then we'll need to log back in. So we'll let you know if that needs to happen. While we are trying to circumvent that, I'm going to go ahead and get us started with an initial question that I think our panelists can respond to. I understand we may not be able to see everyone's faces, but hopefully we can hear everyone's voices. As each of you were thinking about your application process and training, be that for internship or postdoc, I wonder if we could start to share just what were some of the factors that you considered as you were looking for that kind of advanced postgraduate school training experience? And I'm going to start by opening up to one of our recent trainees. Dr. Bean, could you start us off maybe?
Hi, sure thing. So I'm gonna go from the perspective of postdoc. So I'm finishing up a 2-year postdoc now, as was stated before. So I really feel like from one of the main differences from internship to postdoc that I was really looking for in experiences was really what aligned with my future goals. I feel like, oh, were folks able to hear me?
I'm just asking in the chat. Okay.
Okay.
So we'll see if attendees can. Okay. Sounds like all
Okay.
the attendees can. Keep going.
Perfect. Was if the postdoc really aligned with my future goals and really what I saw myself doing as a professional and for my career. Where I feel like internship, I was really looking for experiences that I might be missing to kind of figure out what I wanted my long-term goals to be. But then for postdoc, I was like, okay, I have a better idea what place really maps onto that. Location was still something really important to me too, and thinking about where I want it to be, where do I see myself starting my career. You might also have family kind of ties or obligations that might be important for you to consider about where you want to be. I was also thinking about if the place had opportunities or openings for staff, because if this was a place that I saw myself being long term, would I be able to stay, or would this be a 1 or 2 year experience and then I would have to, look to be somewhere else? So I'd say those were kind of like my top 3 considerations. But really the key, making sure it aligns with your goals. Like, do you want treatment, assessment, research, just making sure that you have that ability at the site that you're applying to.
And I'm just going to open it up if anyone, thank you for that, Yvette. I think that was really helpful place to start us. I'm wondering if there are other factors that Yvette didn't describe that anyone else either very close to training or maybe farther out now wishes that they had considered, sort of looking back with hindsight being 2020.
I can add on to what Dr. Bean was saying in that location was very important for me, and also work-life balance was extremely important for me. So those are probably my top 2 factors. I have a small toddler, and so I knew that there was a cap on how many hours a week that I was going to be able to work. And so because of that, I was very upfront in interviews and asking other trainees what their experiences have been. How many hours a week are you working? That was very important for me to know. Some people were comfortable asking it, some kind of danced around it, and I kind of still honed in on it because I really needed to know that. And I feel like it was really important for both internship and postdoc for me. I stayed at the same place for postdoc that I was last year for internship. So I already knew, but prior to going in, it was really important for me to get a sense of what these people were like. Were you able to do things outside of work? Were you staying there all night? Were you able to go home at 5 o'clock? Like, what was your setup like? So those things were super important for me. And I think you should not feel bad about really asking those questions or caring a lot about location, because it might matter more or less depending on, where you are in training, what you've gotten so far, and, other familial factors. So yeah.
Okay. So we are going to need to quit and restart. So I think what we've determined is going to be the easiest solution is that there's going to be 2 separate Zooms, one for internship, one for breakout, one for postdoc, excuse me. So in just a moment, be paying attention to the chat, and those links will come up. So make sure you grab that link and go into, for panelists, the panel that we've assigned you to. If you're not sure which that is, either reach out to myself or Jessica. For attendees, log into whichever one you're kind of most excited about hearing about immediately. And keep in mind, as Jessica was sharing before, if if you would like to really hear from both, you will have that opportunity through the recording to access that. Thank you all for your patience. This is a strange thing that has not happened to us before. And I'm seeing for our IT support in the background, a question about whether we could also get those links emailed to everyone who registered, just so that they, if they haven't logged in yet, or if they're not able to grab the chat, that they can get logged in. Okay. So okay. Sorry, I'm just checking. sorry, we do have a link. I just want to make sure that I know which link it is. So I'm giving everyone the context they need before asking them to switch. Okay. So I'm going to put this first one, hopefully, in the chat. So this will be for internship. If you are in the internship panel, please use this link. And I will post the one for postdoc in just a moment. Okay. Great. So that'll be the internship one. And then if you are let me just make sure I got that. And then for the postdocs, we'll rejoin on this link. So I will post that again right now, just so it's immediately accessible to folks. And then we will go ahead and make our shift. Thanks, everyone. Sorry for the mix-up. All right. Thank you, everyone, for your flexibility. Sorry about all that. Okay. Rachel, it looks like Miller, Sandoval, King, Bernier, Ainley. Okay, so I think we're just waiting for Dr. Greenlee. Dr. Gerber had a personal emergency. Oh, no, there you are, Jesse. You weren't on my screen. Hello. Okay, so Rachel, I think you can let attendees in if they're not already in. Are our attendees able to hear us? Sorry. Okay, wonderful. So for attendees, start formulating your questions. You can put those either in the Q&A or the chat. For now, I'm going to pose our next sort of question, which particularly for those who are sort of farther in their career away from training, what kinds of benefits and challenges do you all see to either doing a postdoc versus not doing a postdoc? So when you're sort of thinking about those pros and cons of going through the postdoc process, what do you see those as being? And I'll just open it up to anyone who feels like they have something to say.
I can comment on this. I think a big thing to consider is the leap, not just practically, but emotionally and professionally, from being supervised to being an independent practitioner can be a really terrifying one. So one benefit of doing a postdoc is having that structured supervision support that is designed for this sort of intermediate space where you have this level of training, you're developing your own style and your own interests, but you also have someone who's keeping an eye out for you. And for some state licensures, you need to have someone who's doing that supervision. And if you don't do it through a formal postdoc, then that may put more on you logistically to figure out who can be that person. Do I need to pay them? How often are we going to meet? How will we meet? So you're developing a structure in addition to doing your work. One thing that you lose by doing it formally instead of kind of a make your own is some of that flexibility. So the structure that comes with covering all of those things about who's going to be your supervisor, what does that mean, what do the contracts look like, might also mean that you're also beholden to being graded essentially, or having other pieces of evaluation that might go beyond what you would have really needed in order to be licensed or in order to achieve your personal goals. And I'll add one other thing on this, which is the financial piece of this as well. When you're working as a trainee and under someone else's supervision, in many circumstances, you're not able to make as much as you would as an independent practitioner. But I feel really strongly about financial literacy and talking openly about money and what role that plays. So that can be just a piece to think about. It can be a benefit or a risk in either postdoc or not doing a postdoc. But it's just helpful to talk with other people about, what does this look like? What are the implications for if I spend 1 or 2 years in this financial space versus if I do it in another way?
Thanks, Dr. Miller. And I'll just kind of piggyback off that I definitely agree. And that was definitely my experience. One kind of pro that I'll add to doing a postdoc is that, it's oftentimes your last kind of more formalized opportunity for mentorship, and kind of your last opportunity to really specialize and or even explore kind of budding interests, that you might have. I know for me, for example, I during my postdoc, one of my rotations that I was not really expecting to get an introduction in was in OCDs and tics, and that was totally new to me. But now, having had that experience, I can really appreciate how that's really kind of, I think, broadened my scope as a generalist, which I think makes me a more effective specialist. Also, I think there's oftentimes, time and support for other things outside of clinical work, right? So if you're doing more clinical focused postdoc, there's oftentimes time carved out for research or advocacy or other outreach activities. That can be really hard, I think, to get involved in and kind of balance out if you are kind of just independently practicing straight out of internship.
Maybe I'll just piggyback on that. And I really love a couple of these points. One of the things that I think is going to be under-recognized also is with the opportunity of a postdoc is you're really making some new connections and increasing that network so quickly. Right now you're in another, especially if you're doing a research related one, right now you're in another lab, you've got another door that's open up to all sorts of opportunities that can help if you're interested in an academic approach. So that part is great. Although I also really, I love Dr. Miller, your point about the financial literacy part. I actually didn't do a postdoc because I was like, gosh darn, I need to make some money. I've got family. Blah. So I moved right into it because I was thinking I can learn what I need to learn on the job. And that was a very important decision for me, even though I was like, okay, I'm going to miss out on these other network opportunities, miss out on other opportunities to write some more, do some more papers, but I had to balance it out. So I think calling that out is super important. We work so hard and gosh, we need to be compensated. So anyway.
Yeah, and I also wanted to add sort of from the research side of things too. I also didn't do a postdoc because I, for many reasons, just wanted to jump right in, just as Dr. Brainerd just mentioned. But at the same time, the challenges around that was that you really want to be ready to be doing that. And it's really important to think about whether you have great mentors that are not your postdoc mentors, but actually mentors or peer colleagues that can help you through these initial processes of, let's say, setting up your lab or applying for grants or actually having access to data sets that you can continue to publish on as you start your lab and start collecting data. So I think having those pieces ready and available were really important, but also that created some level of challenges if you that you would have otherwise have had the time and resources and mentors available through a postdoc position.
Thank you. I think this has been really helpful as a starting spot. Another question that a lot of folks who are sort of embarking on this process and have decided, yes, a postdoc is sort of worth the stress and worth some of the trade-offs is, how do you actually go about it? What are some of the resources that you found helpful, or what were kind of some of the ways that you thought about reaching out, preparing your application, preparing your materials? Dr. Greenlee, I see you nodding, so I'm wondering if you maybe have some thoughts to start us off.
Sure. I can sort of talk about my own experience. My opinion is that for postdoc in particular, you're really looking for just the right fit with a lab and with a postdoc mentor. And I feel like the postdoc mentor can really make or break the experience in terms of sort of setting up your networking, building professional relationships, giving you access to data. And I am sort of talking from a research perspective. I should clarify that a little bit. But when I was looking for a postdoc, and I knew that I wanted to do a postdoc after graduate school, I was looking, I spent a lot of time talking to the potential PIs that I was interested in working with, and their current lab members, because as an autistic researcher, I wanted to make sure that I joined a lab that was open to that, having that experience on their team. And not everybody is as willing to have autistic voices on their research team as others. But I really think being open and honest about what you want out of the postdoc relationship with the person that you're speaking with as a potential mentor is just probably the most important thing. You know, we can all write really great letters and essays, and we can put application materials together, but if you're not open and honest with the person you're going to work with about what you're hoping to get out of it, what do they need out of a postdoc, it can sort of set up for a pretty challenging experience. So my recommendation would be to really take the time to think about what you want out of the postdoc, so that when you get to the point of applying and talking with research teams, you have really clear goals in mind, and that will really help you sort of narrow down the choices, and it'll help you find that like really good fit.
I just want to really emphasize that that is such a wonderful and I think great takeaway point, right? That fit is so important. I feel like prior to getting to that point, oftentimes maybe as trainees, we're kind of, trying to like retroactively like make things fit, right? Because we need the hours or whatever, and we're kind of working through. But then, yeah, I think postdoc is the opportunity to be choosy. And I do think that there is kind of like that power shift, right? Where there's a lot of postdocs that go unfilled. And so I would encourage folks to, listen to that, inner voice, if there's something that doesn't quite, feel quite right, really challenge yourself and reflect on why that is, and continue the search, because I do think that the right postdoc is out there, right? That would have that good fit.
This is a little less direct, but I'm a big fan of voicing your dreams out loud, of just practicing saying what it is you want to do. And you can start by just like in small talk with people or in different conversations, just dropping in there. It's very common for people to ask, what do you do? And you can maybe say, oh, I'm an intern or I'm a postdoc. I think I maybe see myself running a program focused on anxiety. Just practice tossing ideas out there. And what happens with that is that people who are familiar with that experience and can help with building your connections and awareness of what that really looks like, they'll go, oh, cool, I know so-and-so who does this thing. And if they don't know anything about it, then they'll just take it as a fun fact and move on. But it gives you that chance to practice figuring out, how does it feel when I talk about doing this particular thing? When I said it, was I immediately filled with dread? And I know, no, I don't want to have a postdoc or a future career that involves that sort of thing. But if you feel excited about it as you talk about it, as you voice the things that you're thinking, that is a really helpful cue in knowing what kind of experiences you want to apply for.
So we've got a question from the Q&A that I want to toss out there. This is specifically directed to those who are part of research, but I think some of our clinical, more clinically oriented folks may be able to respond as well. I would like to hear insight into what is the balance between finding a postdoc position that parallels your own research versus finding something that is complementary. What is this realistically like in the autism field?
I wouldn't mind answering this is that okay?
Go for it.
So I think this is a great question, and that I think it's one of the differences between thinking about like grad school and looking for a graduate student, a grad school mentor, and a postdoc mentor. My experience is that people who take on postdocs, at least in the autism field, are not looking for like replicas of their own work. I mean, it should be complementary, and you know, if you're looking to do genetics work, you're not going to come work with me. How about that? But it doesn't have to necessarily be the same. It could be that the postdoc mentor has a particular data set maybe, or has a particular grant that you could sort of build your own research, complementary questions from your dissertation, or maybe they're using a method that you want to be trained in, or what else? I mean, and I'd be interested to hear what other people say, but my experience is that sort of like a general like theoretical match, a general sort of viewpoint on sort of the big research questions is a good place to start, but that you don't necessarily have to be doing exactly the same work per se, within bounds, right? Because part of the great thing about a research postdoc, at least for me, was access to data that I would never have access to otherwise. And so I had to find a lab that had that kind of data that I was looking for. Hopefully that answers the question, or at least some of it.
Yeah, I think that was that was a really helpful answer, and I'm gonna parallel what other people have said here, that as someone who's just finishing up postdoc, this is really your last chance to be a paid trainee, and underpaid, yes, but at least somewhat paid. And I think it's so important from my perspective. I'm going to really advocate for taking a postdoc that's going to teach you a new skill. Now, the balance, it has to be complementary. So as Dr. Greenlee just said, if you're interested in genetics, then you can't veer too far. It's just not realistic for 2 years. But if you have done a lot of intervention work in the lab, but you really want to do it out in the field, implementation science, great time for postdoc. If you've got a lot of EEG experience, but you want to do fMRI work, great time. For me, I had some basic EEG experience, but I really wanted to develop that. And so that was really important for me. So I would say choose somebody who's a complementary fit that does something that you can learn from. I think that's really important for a research postdoc.
And I think I'd pose that same one to some of our more clinically oriented or industry folk. If you are seeing yourself on kind of a particular career path, to what degree do you want to kind of get that experience, really solidify that experience in postdoc, versus to what extent are you looking to really expand through that postdoc experience?
I can jump in. Having hired a lot of different postdocs in my previous life, what I was always looking for was someone who actually wanted a compliment. I thought that was really made the most sense for me, right? So I as the PI needed to be able to offer something to a postdoc that was connected, related, but was offering them something. That was very important to me. So I guess maybe that's a different perspective on the same answer, I think. From an industry perspective, now that I've spent 5 years outside of academics, which I never thought I'd do, but here I am. When we look at hiring folks, and also I should clarify, I have an N of 1 in industry, so my sample size is very limited. But my N of 1 perspective, what we're looking for someone who's gone to grad school, done their postdoc, is someone who's really developed a sort of some degree of depth in their expertise. And often to get that depth, you have to sort of complement that understanding a little bit. A perfect example, Dr. Gerber, your point about like, oh, great, I've sort of got this expertise in EEG, but really for me to fully understand how we think about maybe neuroscience from different perspectives, both a temporal perspective and a spatial perspective, I'm going to augment with MRI. So then that's what we look for from an industry perspective is how much depth do you have in this space? And I think you get a lot of depth by having complementary sets of experiences and perspectives.
I really like what Dr. Gerber said too about using that opportunity to learn something new. And I think that can definitely apply clinically as well. Like it was really important to me, yes, to have it align with my future goals, but part of my future goals was to be able to fill in some of the gaps or the holes in my learning or my training that I wanted. This is our last kind of official training experience, as we have talked about postdoc being. So for me, like I really wanted to do a combination of autism assessment and treatment. But in addition to doing both, I wanted to learn new types of like manualized treatment that I could implement. So like diving in deeper, having more depth in some of those skills, or what could I augment or add to that was really important for me in looking.
So we had a question that we provided some written responses to about identifying a T32 position in particular, but I also was wondering if folks could speak a little bit more broadly about how they went and found postdoc opportunities, and I'll give some context to what I mean by this. I think in the internship space, when you're applying to internship, it is very structured and you go through APIC and there is a rule. And postdoc can feel a little more like the Wild West when you are trying to search and find those positions, whether you are looking for a more research-focused career, a more clinically focused career, or some sort of balance in between, or something completely different like heading to industry. So I wonder if folks could just share a little bit about how they sort of started that process and tried to start looking for what sort of postdoc opportunities were out there.
Yeah, I think that's a really. Oh, go ahead, Erin.
Sorry. No, I was just going to quickly add, make sure to join listserv. I think, especially for research postdoc, like the positions open when there may be funding available to support the postdoc position, and those can come or can become available at different time points across the year. And so I think joining the listservs of professional organizations that you're interested in and your career goals and philosophies are aligned, then hopefully you'll get some information about postings through that. So I just wanted to mention that quickly.
I would also say, don't be afraid to reach out to your network and the networks of people close to you, like other faculty at your department, and like let people know that you're looking for a postdoc. Because sometimes people will get a grant and maybe they haven't had time to put the job ad out, but oh, you're looking for a postdoc, my colleague has a student who would be a perfect fit, and then so let people know that you're looking, put it out there, have people spread the word, and maybe that's not the way you find your postdoc, but it certainly doesn't hurt.
I want to emphasize too that finding and connecting doesn't have to be like all caps networking. I think there's sometimes this pressure that you just have to be out there talking to people and going to things. And that to me sounds very tiring. And it's not how everyone connects and finds things. So having one-on-one conversations with your current supervisors or other people in your program, that is networking too. Sending someone a follow-up email that says like, hey, that sounded really interesting. Thanks for talking about it. That's networking. These things all count. But the other option for starting to explore is by jumping ahead a step. So, and I think people talked about this a bit earlier too, but thinking about what job do I want to have? What kind of career do I want to have? And one of the things I would do was I would look through listings of the things that I thought, job listings of the things I thought I would want to do. And then I would look at who had those jobs and look at where they had done postdoc. Or I would ask people about if they were offering postdoc opportunities. So it was looking at like, I would like my CV to look like this someday, or I would like to be doing this someday. How did that person get there? And does that pathway look like something that would work well with what I have to bring to a fellowship?
I'm also wondering, Dr. Bernier, as someone who got a lot of this, was on the other end of a lot of this networking, if you can speak a little bit to kind of what that was like and how you responded to folks who were reaching out, wondering about opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I loved that. I really appreciate it. Like, I was like, please reach out. I really love that opportunity. It was a great way for me to sort of just meet casually. What it would look like is basically people would shoot me an email or meet up with me at INSAR or what have you, and very open to that. And I've realized it can sometimes be intimidating to reach out to, you know, a faculty member, but I'm so glad that people did, because you know, I wasn't always posting things. I would try to post things, but it gets convoluted and complicated. And really the best way to find out was someone shoot me an email. And it wasn't like I was like, oh gosh, I can't believe this person's or you know, reaching out. It was wonderful. And so then you just have a conversation. It was very casual. I never felt like, I didn't experience the networking. It was someone just reaching out. And that was really low key. It was as much as a text, or I'm not texting, but like an email. It's very easy. So anyway, that's my take. The one thing I will say is, also, because I had a lot of, you know, other friends out there in the community, they would reach out and be like, hey, Rafe, you know, I've got someone who is interested in postdoc. Can they reach out? And I was like, oh, please, of course. And so talking to your current mentor about, you know, folks they know, that's super helpful.
Thanks. So I'm just going to warn people that we're getting sort of closer to the end. So definitely, if you have any questions you're holding on to, go ahead and share those. We do have one in the chat that I'll share in just a minute. Another quick housekeeping thing that I did want to share is that for any of the attendees who would like to be able to connect with other attendees, not just other panelists afterwards, feel free to share your email, your contact information in the chat anytime moving forward, and you all can connect that way. You're also welcome to reach out to us and we can see what we can do. But so another question that we got was, is in thinking about fit, is it more important to have a mentor who's a better mentorship fit or a research interest fit? Or thinking about a position that has better protected research time. So I hear a little of a sort of global question there of, should I be thinking about personality? Should I be thinking about personal factors? Should I be thinking about the structure of the postdoc? Or should I just be thinking about, this is the training that I need, and that's really the principal thing. So I'll open that up to anyone who wants to respond to that.
I don't mind going first. You know, I can only speak based on my own experience. But and I'm not a clinician, so I don't have this sort of clinical requirements. So when I was looking for a postdoc, it was always going to be a research postdoc. But for me, that the interpersonal fit was more important probably than anything else. Because like you spend so much time with this person. And for me, my postdoc relationships have continued. I still work with my postdoc lab. We write grants, we write papers, and because I was able to find a good relationship, I continue to benefit from that experience even years later. It's sort of like there's a lot of things that I could do as a researcher. There's a lot of things I could be interested in. There's a lot of ways I could make different kinds of data and data sets interesting and like be engaged with. But if I'm miserable because my mentor and I don't get along, or we don't have the same values, or we don't communicate well, or whatever the case may be, then the postdoc experience isn't what I need it to be. And I have watched and some of this is a little specific, but I have other autistic researcher colleagues who have done that. They've prioritized the content and the training over some of the more interpersonal relationships, and it's been a disaster. Like it really can go negatively. And so watching that, I chose to find a good sort of interpersonal fit. And that has really worked amazing for me. But again, it's my own personal experience. So others might have something different.
I'll say that I completely agree with Dr. Greenlee in terms of that interpersonal fit. And, you know, it's so important. This is someone you're going to be working with for a couple of years and for the future, hopefully, right? So, but I do want to reframe this just a little bit. I don't necessarily think this is an either or. If you're choosing between these things and there's, say, a really bad mentorship fit, but the research is great, or vice versa, that may not be the choice you want to make. I don't view this as an either or. Ideally, these are the three categories, right, that you are evaluating your fit for the job. And of course, there's a balance. And I think many of us choose to go with interpersonal fit over 100% research fit, because you can learn a new skill and you can move around. And often research advisors are very flexible if you want to bring something of your own to the table. So you can't really sacrifice on individual fit. But I'll say that all three of these things are important and you want to balance all three. And if you're worried about one of them, that may not be the right fit for you. So you want to talk to your advisor, your mentor.
So I'm going to try and slide in one last question here before we wrap up, and I'm going to stop us at a minute or two before just to do some housekeeping. For those of you in particular who are reviewing applications, can you share what it is that makes someone a competitive applicant? And for those of you who have maybe recently gone through this process and been successful in obtaining postdocs, thinking about what made you a competitive applicant, why you think you were able to get that position, which is a little mind reading, but still.
I'm always really excited to work with people who are starting to shape their own practice. So they're starting to get an idea of, this is my writing voice. These are the things that are really passionate or important to me, or that I'm passionate about in the type of work that I'm doing, but who are also eager to learn, because especially in the world of autism and this sort of work, you are constantly learning. And that's another aspect of training, really. If you are coming in from a space of, I think I know most of it already, that's another training step. And I think someone touched on this earlier as well, but starting to show an emerging path of focus. I want to know why someone wants to specialize in this, working with us. Because I think especially many people who get doctoral degrees enjoy high achievement. And so there can sometimes be this tendency to just like, I need to just keep climbing. This is the next thing. And when you've had that time in that space to reflect on, why am I doing this? How will this serve me and the work that I want to do within this discipline? That's a really good sign.
I'll quickly say that what I looked for in postdoc applicants actually really changed the function of my own development. So when I was an assistant professor or associate professor, I was really looking at that point for someone who could connect with me and brought a different skill set so we could actually work on projects together. And as I developed and grew in my own development, further on, I was actually really looking for someone who was independent, who brought interesting, exciting ideas and was looking for, hey, this is where I want to go. And for me, it was like, how can I help that person get where they want to go to? And so I would say it changed over my own development. So that'd be my input.
I'll just say, as a trainee, I think mirroring what the faculty have said, showing that you are thinking about these things, that you've thought ahead to what you want to get out of things, what your career looks like, and asking the questions. And it's okay to ask a question that ends up determining that it's not a fit, because then you've asked the right questions. And I think that shows that you're a good match potentially, and you're thinking about these things.
I second that as a trainee. I think showing that you're eager to learn, like I feel like this field of autism, as Dr. Miller said, is kind of a lifelong learner role. So showing that, but also being confident in what you feel like you bring to the table and what ideas you have. And I think that's something different from internship. Like this is not a match process. You can kind of decide where you feel like you fit best in some ways. So being like, I can bring this to the table and here's where I would like some support or to learn.
Mhm.
I just want to emphasize Dr. Bean's point again, because that was so good. For so much of our training, we're trying to kind of pretzel ourselves into like, I really want this, and so let me be who they want me to be. And especially as you're getting into this stage of your career, it's so much about what you want, what is going to be helpful to you, what can you bring to this space, versus like, how can I become what they want me to be?
And a
Yeah.
good postdoc mentor will help you figure that out.
Yes. I think a good postdoc mentor is absolutely interested in that and also really excited, you know, I think as Rafe was sharing as well, about the things we can learn from you. I will say I have clinical postdocs who I have stolen report models from and really enjoy what I learned from them when their writing style. And I've had research postdocs work with me where I feel like they've taken me into a space of new data analysis or a new kind of research question that I wouldn't have gone to had they not come. And I think that's one of the exciting things, really. I do think there is this lovely shift at the postdoc phase where you're really moving more into being a colleague, and we're really excited to welcome you. So I am just going to wrap us up now. I've just shared in the chat a moment ago the, and now my screen is not wanting to operate appropriately. Here we go. The feedback survey, as well as the link to sign up for the SIG if you are not already a member. I want to say a huge thank you once again to our panelists, Dr. Miller, Dr. Salgado, Dr. Bernier, Dr. King, Dr. Greenlee, Dr. Gerber, and Dr. Bean for all making time in your very busy schedules for us today. This has been so informative and so useful. I know some of you may have additional follow-up questions or may also have wanted to be in the internship panel. So any of the folks here, you see their contact information, you are welcome to reach out. You can also reach out to myself or Dr. Schwartzman if you have more of a global question and you're not sure who exactly it would go to. We can definitely try and link you to that person. So all that information is here. And then a reminder that you will be getting access to the recordings through an email that should come to you shortly. That email should also have this information. If you have not followed this link already, we would love your feedback about how this went. So please do scan this QR code to or click the link to fill out our feedback survey. We also love having new members and really encourage students to join. This is a great way to get into the SIG and to do some of that networking that you've been hearing about, to learn about different opportunities, connect with people who are interested in what you're interested in. So go and sign up. You can follow us on X. We have all learned it's not Twitter, it's X. You can go to our website, however is best for you to connect with us. But thank you again for attending. Thank you again, panelists, for sharing your time, and have a wonderful, wonderful day. Bye, everyone.
Thanks. See you.